Hello guys, welcome to this tutorial. Before we get started, I want to let you know that you can find all the code example and resources we'll be using today in the GitHub Repository linked in the video description below. This repository serves as a valuable companion to the tutorial, allowing you to follow along, experiment, and explore the code on your own time. I'm Samuele Giampieri, and I'm a freelance developer. Join my community by subscribing to my channel at Devergo Labs. Explore a wealth of coding content and free courses on my website, devergolabs.com. Hello guys, welcome back to this NextAuth tutorial. In the previous chapters, I showed you how to install the NextAuth library in our Linux machine, and now we're going to see how to deploy and how to integrate the NextAuth in our Next.js project. We will see that there is a server-side part, so we have to implement some logics in the server side, and the other part of our code is going to be on the client side. The process actually involves 4 steps. So the first step is to create an API route in Next.js, and of course it's server side. The second is on the client, so we have to wrap our application to make sure it will work smoothly with all the dynamics of NextAuth. The third step is to integrate in our pages the session and all the features of NextAuth. So the main method is we will see is the use session, and is a method that works on the client side. And last steps is we're going to play with all these features. And after we integrate this package, we are going to explore it and play dynamically with the pages, with the button, and we'll see how it works on the ground. Let's start with the first step, that is the API integration. This is our Next.js project. See, we saw already in the previous step, in the previous chapter. I already created a new folder that is API health, and the last part of the segment is a dynamic route, and is spread NextAuth, like that. And we create a file inside that we call route.ts. This is the standard structure to create the Next.js API route. Actually, in NextAuth, we have different strategies, different way to integrate it. If you read the documentation, you will see that there are 3 main groups, 3 main type of integration. I show you the documentation, so we can check directly. This is the link of the documentation. NextAuth are OAuth definitions that allow your users to sign in with their favorite pre-existing logins. So you can use any of our many predefined providers or write your own custom OAuth configuration. We will see in details the OAuth in the next chapters. Now, in this chapter, we will discover the credentials way. We will see that there are many providers that we can integrate. For now, we will see the credential one. Before diving into the credentials, there is also an email provider, and actually it sends the magic links via email that the user can click on to sign in. You have likely seen them before if you have used software like Slack, of course. It's a sign-in confirmation. It's to increase the security of the authentication, and we will see later how to deploy it. So in this chapter, we will see the credentials. So the credential provider allows you to handle sign-in with arbitrary credentials such as username and password with 2-factor authentication or hardware device. Is the standard one that usually most of the website use. The credentials usually are stored in a database. We will see later how to integrate MongoDB or DynamoDB to store all the credentials from the user. So first of all, we have to create this route. So the route is a standard Next.js route. We have to import our package that is credentials provider. This is our instance from providers and the credentials. Okay. So we have to import also the NextAuth main module. Here we go, from Next. And then we save it. Type declaration, of course, is not point. Okay. We also have to import the next options to check with TypeScript. Is also practice from NextAuth. Okay, so we have our dependency already imported. In this file, we will integrate all the logics, and also we use this file to set all the options. We will see also in details all the NextAuth options with some of the next chapters. Here we will set just the main options that we need to manage our Hello World application. So let's create our route. Is out. Actually, this is the option object, the NextAuth options, and this object will contain all our options, all our settings. We are going to set the providers. So I want to use the credential provider, is an array. Of course, we can use more than one provider. We can implement many kind of provider, and if our application is growing complexity, we can decide how to implement different providers and protect the pages in our application following and matching different providers. In this case, we are going to use, of course, only one because it's just for demonstration purpose. But in the future, if you need, you can, inside this array, define more than one provider. Okay, this is our credential provider, and our credential provider. Okay, there is a direct connection between these options and the form that we are going to see on the client side. NextAuth provide default pages. We will see in the next chapter that actually we already have some pre-built pages like a sign-in pages, sign-out error page. Anyway, there are some built-in pages, but we can also customize these pages, and we will see later how to do it. What we write here, it will set up directly the built-in pages. If I set the name, we will see that this name will be in our form, in our sign-in form. As I said, these credentials are used to generate a suitable form on the sign-in page. You can now specify whatever fields that you are expected to be submitted. You can, for example, add like a user, email, another field like group, or any attribute. You can specify whatever fields you are expecting to be submitted, and what you add in this object, you will see directly in the form, so that the form will be updated depending on what we put inside this object. After name, we can declare the credentials data. Actually, we want to include the first field, that is username. The label will be showed upon the input field, input part. Label called username. The type is the form type. In this case is just text. And if we want to put a placeholder, we can also do it, and we can write add your username, and here we can also add the password, and here we also add the password. So the password, we write on the label, the type is password, table password type password, and here we go. We don't need a placeholder here. Name credential is okay. We also have to declare the asynchronous function that is authorize, and actually this is the part where NextAuth will get all the data from the user, and it will check with our database, or we can implement our logic here. Let's see how to implement. So authorize is the function, and it has two args, credentials, and that is the request object. In this part, we need to implement our logic. Actually, the function takes the credentials, so it's the data that we get from the client side. It's submitted. When the user submits the credential, it will activate this function and return an object that represents the user data. For example, we can also use the record request to get more parameters and implement more complexity in the authorized logic. For example, we want to know the IP address, the headers, or other information about the request. If we have a Dynamo database, we will see later how to implement. We can add a fetch request here. Code that we can find in the documentation shows something like that. Is a fetch to your endpoint. We get the user from the fetch, and if we get the user, we return the user from the function. If not, you return null. If no error and we get the user back with this user, NextAuth will use this data to create the session, and will write it to the cookies and will activate of the process of authentication. If our database doesn't give back the user, if it doesn't find the user, the function will return null. NextAuth will know that the authentication failed and maybe redirect the user to another page or ask to sign in with the correct credentials. Now, we don't implement any database because we will see later. We will also discover how to create a new user with Dynamo database. We will see practically. We will dive into AWS and I will show you how to complete the process with a key value database, with a NoSQL database. You can also, of course, implement with MongoDB, SQL, or any other database that you want. Let's pretend that our authentication is always correct. Okay, the user that we are going to simulate in the client side are all in our database, that they are all allowed to get inside our protected route. We want to return this user. The user information depends on our application, depends on how we want to store in the database. Usually, to describe the user, we can use a username, like an alias, or we can use the email and the password, of course. And for the password, we cannot use like in plain text, but we will use an hash mechanism. But in this way, let's pretend that the user send all the user data and also the password. We will see how to implement also the hash mechanism to check with the database and return back the user data. We need to turn a promise because TypeScript expects a promise. We cannot put directly the object. If not, we will get a TypeScript error. Inside the promise will resolve in our user object. So let's pretend I am the user. So the username is Samuele. This is the first. I use also the email. Let's create a random email. Samjam is okay. gmail.com. For example, we want also to retrieve from the database the image, like an avatar, and it will be like an URL image, and other data, another attribute that we call other data, some data. Here we go. So we get from our authentication database this user data every time for any request of signing in. So our actual credential providers is already complete. I just want to console.log credentials, so later we will see how we receive the object from the client side. So another important things to set now is the secret. And among the changes, actually, there is this obligation from NextAuth to generate and provide a secret. So NextAuth will use the secret to generate the JWT that is really useful for the session. We will see the function of the JWT. Actually, it stores all the information about the authenticated user and how to interact with the application. This secret will be used by NextAuth to hash the JWT token, because we cannot show the JWT in plain text for security reason, and because also this JWT object will be stored in the cookies, in the client cookies. This secret will be used to sign and decrypt the session cookies. To create a secret, we can create a secret in base64. We can also do directly in our Linux terminal. Open SSL, just random. It's going to be a base 6432. So it generates our secret key. We don't store, of course, the secret in our code because it's not safe. So we are going to put it in our environment variable in Next.js, and we call it NextAuth secret. And here we go. We can set this new environment variable directly in our next.config.js. It's NextAuth secret. It's going to be like that. And here we go. This is our secret. Auth will ask us the NextAuth URL that is mandatory for the production. And we will declare later, but now I can show you. It's going to be NextAuth URL. And here, for now, we can just put our local host. We just put our local host for now, but in production, we have to set our domain. For example, we have to specify, of course, with the HTTPS or HTTP, and then it's going to be the complete domain for the production mode. And the NextAuth URL environment variable actually is used to specify the root URL of your application, and actually is a required configuration because it helps NextAuth to generate correct callback URL during the authentication flow. So it's really important. These two variables is really important. And for example, when a user is redirected to a third-party authentication provider like Google or GitHub, NextAuth will use this URL to log in and then to your application. Of course, it needs the URL where the authentication callback route is located. Now, our route is complete. We set also the secret. Here we don't need for now because we only need for production, as we said. Okay, the next step is to wrap our application in the NextAuth provider. First of all, we have to create a new folder that it's called context. This is a client component, so we tell to Next.js that this is a client component with the use client. First of all, we import the session provider. What we do here actually is to create a component to insert in our layout. Okay, we call session provider. We import this module from NextAuth React. We also import just a React node to check with the TypeScript. And here we go. From React, say. And we export our component. Default. We call the component the NextAuth provider. Why we are creating an external component? Because to use this dependency, we need a use client. So we wrap everything inside this component and we import in the layout. Actually, the params of this component is the children, that actually are the pages. The children will be the pages that we use in the layout. And we specify that the children are, of course, React Node. Here we go. So the body of the component is going to return our session provider that wrap our children. Session provider and our children inside. Okay. Here we go. We create this component. And now we have to import it from the layout. Is the global layout that is used by Next for any page that we are going to render in our route. Here is all the default packages. We import the new one that is called NextAuth. Right, so we use the absolute import, so we don't need to think in a relative path every time we are going to import some module. So from the root, we go to the app, we go to the context that we create, and we point the file that we just created. And So we wrap the children inside this next provider. And here we go. So our application now is wrapped inside this NextAuth provider. It's really useful, and it's important to implement the use session. That is the most important method that we can use on the client side. The layout is okay. So now we integrated all the code that we need to make a NextAuth work in our application. Actually, we don't need to create a new route. We just modified the home page, we modified the root page, and implement the logic inside this page. First, I want to create a client component to import inside this page. And we call home comp. And later we will import inside this page. We create a separate file because I want to keep this page server-side rendering, and this component will be CSR. It will be client-side rendering, because to implement the NextAuth package on the client side, we need to specify that is a use client component. So the home comp will be a use client. Let's import all the module that we need to play with our application with NextAuth. The most important is the use session. The use session actually is a method that returns an object containing two values. The values is data and status. So we also want to use sign in. Sorry, sign in is another module that will help us to manage the sign in process and manage also the redirect after the sign in process, and the sign out the same way from NextAuth React. Here we go. So let's create our component, export default. We can call a component, it's okay. Let's create comp. From this instance, we want to extract different objects. So the first one is data, session. Second is status. And you can also import other object or other method like update, but we will see later. Now we just deal with these two, with the session and the status. With use session invocation. Okay. Like that. When we load the page, we activate the use session and we retrieve the session object and the status. That will tell us if the user is authenticated or not, and give us also information about the session, like expiration date. So we see now how the session object is structured. I want to create like a mechanism that if the user is authenticated, this page will show a sign out button, okay? But if the user is not authenticated, I want to give the user the possibility to sign in. So if the user is not authenticated, the page will show a sign in button. If we click on the sign in, the page will redirect the user directly to our sign in pre-built page that we were talking before. Let's create our page. We want, first of all, to see the section object. The use session will give us a data object and the status. So the data can have the session objects or can be undefined or null. When the session hasn't been fetched yet, data will be undefined. So if this data is undefined, it means that we don't have the data yet, it's not fetched yet. In case it failed to retrieve the session, data will be null. So in case of success, data will be the session. And the status actually is a string that can have three different values. Okay, so the states can be loading, it can be authenticated or unauthenticated. It's useful actually to integrate all our algorithms, our logics, and our mechanism inside all the page depending on our needs. If you want to get deeper and understand more things and details, you can also check the official documentation at this link on the client page, client API, and you will discover more information about the use session. And so the first information that is important is that use session is on the client side. You cannot use on the server. For the server, we will see There are other methods. You can also set a require section, and we are going to discover also, we are going to explore this feature later. And yeah, you can find more information directly on the page. So now let's create our page. It's time to see how it works and if it works, of course. I want to tell, if we have the session, okay, if NextAuth return on the session, it means that it's authenticated, okay? We can use the session, also the status. If the status is equal to authenticated, we implement some logics. If it's, for example, loading, we can show to the customer using the React states some loading skeleton or other logics inside. Anyway, let's make it simple. If it's section, I want to see the section on the console. I want to return a button that gives us the possibility to sign out, because we already signed in. So the button is, before the button, I want to show some text, like we call text count, just to make it a little bit presentable. Set the styles later, and we want to show sign in as, actually we want to see the name of the user. Don't forget that actually there is not a real user, but we set it to show always Samuele. We already set here in the API before that we always see, we will always see the name Samuel in this one, because actually it's not a real check. We will see sign it as, let's see, the email. The email is going to be in the session, inside the object session, user email. So we will, when it's signed in, we will see always samjam@gmail.com. And here we go. We also want to see a button to sign out. So the class name is going to be just called sign out, and we will set later sign out. And the button will trigger the on-click event with the callback function. Actually is sign out that we import here. This is a callback function provided by NextAuth. It provides to redirect the customer to the sign out page and log out from the application. Say sign out, we set here, just set like that. We call this button sign out, and here we go. So if the session is okay, we will see like that. If not, we can return not this button, but a sign in button. Okay, let's integrate the same stuff. We just modify a little bit. Okay, we call also is okay the same class text count, and this is not sign in, so it's not sign. If I click to the button, I will redirect the user to the sign in pre-build page. Okay, and here we go. So the page is ready. I think we already set everything. I think we are ready to start the application and see if it works. We are missing something because we have to import this component inside the page. If not, we will not see anything. We import the component, can call onComp, we can call as we want, because actually is a export default. onComp from the file is homecomp, this one here at the same level. Okay, so we just return this component and everything is done. So let's try if our application works. Let's go inside our project folder. Is NextAuth tutorial. Here we go, and we'll start our application. Run dev. Okay, so we got an error. Let's debug it. So module not found can resolve NextAuth React. So let's see. Okay, session provider can resolve NextAuth React. Let's see, where is it? It is in context. NextAuth provider. So, this damn point. Okay, let's try again. Okay, that's good. And we have another problem. NextAuth API out, route, export element for each. Okay, that's correct because we didn't specify, we didn't export this API route in Next.js, so it doesn't know that is a route actually. So we call const handler, and is our NextAuth instance, and we, as parameter, we give our options. Okay, and we export. We want to use this API as both as get and post. We export handler as get, and we export handler as post. So now compile is good. So we are implementing the simple initialization. Okay, we will see later there is also another type of initialization, that is the advanced one. The advanced one will give us the possibility to interact with the request. Anyway, you can also find in the official documentation. Here in the configuration and the initialization, we are using this simple initialization for app route. Actually, that is that one, but you export like that. But there is also an advanced one that we will see in the next chapter, how to integrate and how to interact with the rec and all the information inside the request object. So let's try now. Let's test our application. So I get inside this page. Okay. Oh, I forgot to create the class for our button because it's really ugly like that. We call sign out for the sign out button, and let's give a background color aquamarine. That's padding of 10 pixels is enough. Margin, so it is not, can separate a little bit from the border of the page, and let's give a little bit border radius of 10 pixels is okay. Here we go. We create the sign in the same way. We just change the color. Let's give a little bit red to sign out. Here we go. Actually, it's the contrary. I want to keep the red to the sign out and the green to the sign in. A smooth color to don't become blind. Here we go. And also to text. The text contained that we just want to give a little bit padding of 10 pixels. Here we go. Here we go. Okay, so now it's more presentable. I'm not authenticated. I'm going to click the sign in, and let's see if NextAuth, perfect. It redirects us to the sign in pre-built page. So you remember we already set all this field in our route options, and under the credential providers, we change the name credential here. We can put what we want, sign in with my website. We can do wherever we want here. It's just a text. And so we can change this text. We can change our placeholder. We can add also more field, more input field text. It's okay. It can be also a selector, what we want. We refresh the page and we have also a third input. We don't need this, it's just for demo. Let's just leave the username and the password. Okay. The username is not going to check. We can call my user. We can call my password, any password, random password, because we don't check it. When I click this, NextAuth will activate this function, authorize. We will get the credentials here. I want to show you on the console how is the object and value, and we don't have our logic here, and it will resolve with this user. Okay, so let's sign in with my website. Here we go. So we get logged inside the website. We console the credential, that is this one is my user, and this is the password, because it's the credential from the client side that actually is different than this one that I return to NextAuth. So this is the CSRF token. This is the username. This is the password. I want to see from the client, we want to see how is the session that NextAuth created, the expiration, all the details. So we can actually see here on the console, this is the object and this is the section. The section expired in 1 day. We can also change this one. We will see later how to change it. And the user is samjam@gmail.com, the image and the name is Samuele. Actually, it's different because next return to the client these details. Okay, and here we go. The application work, and we sign in our app. If we can see sign in as samjam@gmail.com, because actually we put in our client comp, we put the text that is sign in as session.user.email, and we can sign out. Here we go. We are not signed in anymore. Let's see how are the cookies in this procedure. Our cookies actually is this one. We don't see the session cookies because we are not authenticated anymore. If we authenticate again, we will see also another cookies. Let's just get a random one. So we are signed in, and we will see that our cookies has also the session tokens. So this session token is hashed with our secret that we specified at the beginning of the tutorial. And it contains all the information that we need in our application. So for who doesn't know, the CSRF is a token, is a cross-site request forgery token, and it's called CSRF, and it's actually required to make a post request, and is something that gives us more security when a client submit some data to the server. Actually, it's like a unique ID that make a more secure level. NextAuth use also a CSRF token. Actually, it stands for cross-site request forgery, and is a type of security vulnerability that occurs when some attacker tricks a user browser into making an unintentional request to a different site. And it happens where the user is authenticated. So if we use a unique ID, if we use a unique hash ID, we can make the server authenticate the client script, the client data, only if it matches with the CSF token that the server calculate and create before. It's all for this session. With the next chapter, we will see the difference with the simple initialization and the advanced one. We have reached the end of this video tutorial, and I genuinely hope you have enjoyed its content. If it has been helpful to you, please show your support by liking the video and sharing it with your friends on social media. If you haven't already, I warmly invite you to subscribe to my channel to stay updated on upcoming lessons. Don't forget to check out my website, devergolabs.com, where you will find a plethora of interesting programming content. You can also send me collaboration requests and explore all the programming services we offer. Your participation and support are crucial in my growing and to grow this community and providing you with even more valuable resources. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here with us, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video tutorial.